listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining today will be Sean.
Hello.
And that'll be it because Derek is not able to join us. But on this episode, we're discussing Blue Velvet, the most straightforward film from David Lynch, which I think it's hard to dispute that categorization of it as his most straightforward work.
What about Elephant Man? I haven't seen that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like that and Eraserhead. I mean, the subject matter is a little bit more out there.
Yeah.
But they're pretty linear, too. But
This is like an easy to digest for first time, people getting into Lynch. That's why I recommended it for Derek, because I didn't know how much he had watched it. But yeah, he didn't finish the movie, so.
Yeah, we'll get his thoughts on it the next time he's on the podcast. But we're doing Blue Velvet. Before that, we'll go through some recent news and things we've been watching. And in recent news, there's the trailer for Death Wish launched, which is the Eli Roth remake starring Bruce Willis, written by Joe Carnahan. And the trailer elicited a bit of reaction on social media from people because I saw a lot of people who aren't necessarily Eli Roth fans or horror fans, as general movie bloggers and podcasters and people on Twitter talking about how like the movie is the trailer for it looked like it was such in favor of fascism that like it should come with like boots to stomp people's heads in and stuff when you go to see it. And whether or not you agree with that stance, like, Death Wish is the story, the original movie, where a guy's like wife and daughter, like, so his wife gets killed, right, and his daughter gets raped, and then he just goes on a vengeful tirade or spree against criminals in the city, which includes, wasn't Jeff Goldblum in that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was in the first one. Either the first one or the second one. I think the first one, though. Did we cover that on a podcast as its own podcast?
No, I think there was a period of time where I think Derek watched some of them.
Yeah,
I think
I
you
watched
some of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this one's from Eli Roth, and the trailer alone at one point has Back in Black playing the AC/DC song. So it's giving kind of like a lighthearted feel to the vigilante murder spree. So, Joe Carnahan's more of an action, because like he wrote and directed like Smoking Aces, the 2010 reboot of the A-Team, The Grey with Liam Neeson. So there's been a number of movies he's done that were more like action fare. And I mean, granted, the original Death Wish was just kind of like an action film, but in today's political climate, it'll be interesting to see if they do any commentary.
Yeah, it's a very different film. And even in that film, they sprinkled in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like there were some little things here and there.
It was like the second and third ones where you had like a rocket launcher. And it was more over the top.
Yeah. The first one was almost like, I don't know, it almost gave me a feel of something grounded closer to like Taxi Driver, where it's just somebody who's like been disturbed and mad and everything. But or like Falling Down, like Falling Down is out there. Like there is a rocket launcher in Falling Down as well. But it's one of those situations where, he's just kind of tired of the violence and stuff like that around his life. And this, and a lot of times too, at least in that film, sometimes he would set them up, I think, but he would be walking, and then if he got put in a situation, then he would kill them.
Yeah.
The shots in this trailer was like Bruce Willis walking up to people and just shooting them.
Yeah, or like baiting them into crime.
Yeah. So, and that's the difference between an action film is normally an action film, it's two people shooting at each other and they're at odds on something. And this seems like, Bruce Willis being the judge, jury, and executioner, which is dangerous, if you think about like, everybody thinks they're right and they think their opinions are right. You know what I mean? Like that's what makes it their own opinion. And so it just almost seems like a power fantasy for, people who want to have justifiable homicide, or kill justifiably.
Well, like, and two, like I was saying, like, Netflix is going to have the Punisher series, the Marvel Punisher series come out this year, later in the year. So, I think that'll cover somewhat similar ground in a more not even necessarily cartoonish, but a more broad, grandiose, like action way. Because like in like the Daredevil season 2 when the Punisher appeared, like there were some brutal, like super bloody R-rated fight scenes that involved him. Like, so like there's a lot of stuff coming out that has kind of like the vigilante revenge aspect, and it's just, I think that with Eli Roth, we've seen the in-depth political commentary he can include in something like The Green Inferno, which, in my opinion, was...
That's a wink, wink Williams giving right now.
The political commentary wink that was so bad that I was almost like laughing out of anger at the movie. Like, so if he brings like the incredibly tone-deaf commentary and or just plays it straight as like a schlocky remake, just set in present day, like, and two, the fact a lot of people pointed out you have Bruce Willis's character wearing a hoodie throughout a lot of it, and people were saying like, oh, that's just, an everyday normal guy, blah, blah, blah. But also, like, I think a lot of people evokes imagery of like Trayvon Martin, all these other social things that have gone on.
I mean, when we talk, we did talk about this maybe before, even if we didn't cover it like on a full podcast, but and that was a lot of the conversation was, what would this remake be like? And you could make a very interesting movie today, and it would have to be very different than the other one. I think the point of doing a remake of this, maybe not the point of this remake, but the point of doing one today would be to kind of explore, I don't know, I guess just their perception of what's justifiable. You know what I mean? Like, because people see stuff on the news, people get killed or whatever, or they see drug dealers get killed and they're like, good riddance or whatever, or druggies. But, it's like everybody has their story and their place, and it's not all black and white. Like, drug dealers shouldn't be dealing drugs, but, it's not all black and white. There's not good guys and bad guys, and that's what this film seems to be setting up. Yeah. And you could do a much more interesting film where, maybe, I don't know how you do it, but, like maybe you come at it from the other side too, where it's like you're seeing one person's struggles and maybe something they're forced into. Yeah. And then it ends up a collision with, somebody who thinks they're justifiable in what they're doing and they're taking out the trash when really, you know what I mean? Like there's two different sides to every coin.
So like if the movie's set up, like, so you have Bruce Willis set up as the vigilante killer, and then, you see his side. Like, but what if there's a parallel B plot of like a kid in a poor neighborhood that's having to resort to crime for, or
being forced into it by somebody else.
Forced into it and really hasn't done anything yet, and then like has a cross paths with the Bruce Willis character. Like, that would be interesting to see. Yeah. Like, show both sides of the coin. Not saying you have to show. It just seems like for the time period now, the original Death Wish didn't really age well. I mean, like, from the time of when it was shot and when it was made, it's still entertaining. It's still entertainment, but the social, political commentary needs a little bit of a refresh.
Yeah, and you have distance from it now, so it's like, oh, this was made in the 70s. You can forgive a lot of things. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, we were able to forgive a lot of movies and things that you wouldn't want to see on screen today, or even language, you know what I mean? Or, like, certain levels of, I guess, just tone about some things. But yeah, you can make a super interesting Death Wish movie, and this just seems like a straightforward action film, but it also has that angle where it's like, this could be dangerous to the wrong person watching this film, and that's, but having said that, I like to watch Bruce Willis shoot stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, well, like on one level, it looks like Eli Roth's like most studio-like film, and that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. Like, I like the independent films. Like, we watch all kinds, and I like big budget, studio films. But there could be some entertaining bits in this. It's just the context may make the rest of it hard to swallow.
Yeah. So let's have to wait. I mean,
and we haven't seen the film. This could be a poorly cut trailer.
Yeah. I mean, trailers are problematic for a lot of movies. It's just with the Eli Roth movies we've seen, I have not come to expect any nuance really, because the original, like, so you had like Cabin Fever, Hostel, and Green Inferno, which is just like white kids go places and get messed up, so you should probably just stay at home. It was like the underlying message. Mm-hmm. And then, so like, what is the message of this movie going to be? Like, if you stray across, they'll break the law that you should be killed. Like, we'll have to wait and see like what comes through, because like at least he wasn't writing. It was Joe Carnahan writing it, who's made other stuff that did have some nuance. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'll be interested in checking it out. But man, this is If it strikes the same tone as the trailer does, that's going to have some. There's going to be a lot of articles written about this film. You know,
if you have Bruce Willis walking around, kind of baiting people into or looking for criminals to kill, while it has like an AC/DC soundtrack and pop music and laughs and jokes in it, like that could be, like I said, just for the time, I don't know that'll fit, be the right chord to strike, but
or maybe it shows like the decay of his own sense of judgment and by the end of it he's killing people for breaking into cars, and then it's like, oh, this guy's a monster. You know what I mean? Like that's another way to go at it too. But
well, then like if you look at the Facebook comments on like your local news stations stories about things, like it seems like inevitable that like, oh, there was a string of car break-ins and they finally caught the suspect, and like second or third comment down, it's like, oh, just put him to death.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And it's like, yes, it sucks that somebody can steal your stuff. But at the same time, like, should someone stealing stuff out of your car be cause for someone just to put a bullet in their head? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, so it's like, if there's any of that commentary in it, it could be interesting. I don't think there will be, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'd like to see this film from, another director tackled. You know what I mean? Like somebody else that is not, that isn't going to make just an action film. Like I would have loved to have seen that film, but
everything Eli Roth has made have been like kind of faux grindhousey or
genre films. Yeah,
genre films or very much throwbacks to other stuff. So this is the first time we kind of get to see him do something that's not the horror world. I mean, he's been in other movies acting, like Inglourious Bastards. In terms of like directing a movie, this would be like his first kind of non-horror film. Well, Knock Knock was more of a thriller, but we'll have to wait and see. But other news. Creep 2, Mark Duplass tweeted in the past week that they are picture locked and it'll be coming soon. So Creep was the found footage movie that you can watch on Netflix currently. They had Mark Duplass in it, and they weren't really spoiling that story in case you haven't seen it, because you can go out and watch it now. Like, we liked it overall on the podcast. And it was a Blumhouse Tilt movie, I think, where they try to do platform releases like on digital platforms. So I think like Hush was another one, and some... I think Green Inferno was one that they did the theatrical release for. So I'm not sure if this one's from Blumhouse too, but it's same stars, same sequel to that first film, and I'll be interested to see what direction they go, because the first movie, there's kind of like a lot of question like, oh, is this or is this not a certain type of movie or situation? And by the end of it, that question's been answered. So how the second movie goes from there will be interesting to see. It's just like some guy shooting a documentary, basically, and he goes someplace, and what is his name, the actor in it? Is that Mark Duplass? Yeah.
Okay, I get him confused with his buddy that he works with. Who else does he work with? Oh, not his buddy, his brother.
His brother, the Duplass brother.
Yes. So basically, he goes to like this cabin or whatever, and Mark Duplass is acting a little weird, and it's like, is he just a weird guy? Like, you don't know what direction this is going to go, because a lot of times, Mark Duplass is in comedies and stuff like that. And it is very funny at some parts too, because he's just being so weird. So it's just interesting to watch from that angle. So
because the movie was both movies are directed by Patrick Bryce, who was in the first movie. The first movie is Duplass and Bryce is essentially the main all the cast. And then the sequel is going to have, it's being directed by Patrick Bryce, and then it's going to have Duplass in it, but then Karen Sony and Desiree Akhavan. So it's different other supporting characters. So I have to see what happens with it. But yeah, the first movie's on Netflix. You can check it out. It's not very long. And if it's a found footage movie, but it's not the unbearably bad to watch ultra shaky cam found footage or
there's a reason for this film existing. It's not just somebody trying to make a found footage film because they want to make a horror film for cheap or something. It's like, oh, they had a cool idea, and this is a cool way to present these characters in this situation.
In a way that they made it for probably not a lot of money. I mean, the first movie, I could have easily seen that being made for under $100,000. So I'm excited to see where they go with the sequel, because I enjoyed the first one. So if you want to see the first one, it's on Netflix. You can check it out there.
It's the perfect film for Netflix too, because it's not one I would have wanted to see in theaters. Really, I would have been fine seeing it in theaters, but it's really great to not have to like feel like you spent any extra money on that film because it's a good thing to digest and then kind of
too,
be
like,
done with it.
If Netflix and these different distribution models make it so that there are more people making sub $100,000 movies, or I'm not sure what the budget for that movie was. I'm just guessing the first one could have been made for that. Like, if you have people releasing movies made on these, like,
micro budgets,
if relatively big name actors, because the Duplass brothers, they make a shit ton of movies and make them for cheap, and like that's one of the big things they talked about why they've been involved in so many projects. But like, if you can see more movies getting made with like decent level name recognition, like on the actors and stuff,
and talent,
and they're being made for like 30,000, like 40, 50, 60, like under $100,000, then that's awesome. And especially if there's like this distribution model where you can get out in front of people and then get a bigger audience and a bigger following. Because like independent film, like for indie film, like the level of stuff that we've been around and we've worked on, like $20,000 or $30,000 is a pretty big budget. And if and that's having essentially all like local talent without having real Hollywood names, because Mark Duplass has been in a bunch of stuff. Was on the show The League that ran FX for years. Has been in a bunch bigger
HBO
movies,
shows,
HBO
right?
shows. Yeah. Been in movies, went to Sundance, all this stuff. So like a pretty big name actor can do that. Like hopefully that would inspire more actors to want to do these projects aren't as huge of budgets. If there's more of a direct route for it to get released and to, be able to make money. Now the economics of Netflix and streaming are not that friendly to a lot of small budget projects, but
I saw something about how they're like hemorrhaging money, but that's kind of their plan right now. What is it, like 20 billion or something?
Yeah, their plan is just
debt.
to create as much original content as they can, so that at some point in the future they don't have to license content from others. They just have their own catalog of content, so that they can have content they already own that people will get the service for, and they're not have to pay exorbitant licensing fees. Because I think a lot of their licensing fees in years past was like they would license from Stars, who had a license for movies. And then, as these other networks see them as a legitimate threat, or the studios see them as a threat, then they would increase the amount of money required to license certain movies. And then that gets to the point where it's out of their control and they're paying billions of dollars to get movies, versus if they make all their own content, they own all of it from beginning to end forever. And then that's what draws people in. They don't have to pay those fees.
The bummer thing is like some of the films though that are made on there, like Hush, Creep, the Wet Hot series, like they're not going to get disc release, so you get no extra special features. Yeah. That's the bummer part to those, and it's smart on their part to kind of lock that in. I was even telling my wife, because after we watched the Wet Hot 10 years later, she was like, "Oh, we can watch the movie because it's like one of my favorite films of all time." And we have it on disc on DVD somewhere, but I went on Netflix. I'm like, it's not on there, and I saw somebody say it's on Stars, which I have Stars, I think, still, or no, I just got rid of it, but that makes sense because I think they've always had that film. So I guess they were licensing that film through Stars because it used to be on Netflix. And then Stars probably said, "Oh, you really want this movie?
Yeah.
Here's the prices." And then they just...
Yeah, because they used to do like bulk licensing agreements with people, and they would get like a big chunk of movies, which is why like when a certain deal ends, you see a bunch of movies go away. So now they've been making more deals. Like they made like a deal with Disney to get, because like Rogue One is on there and a number of the Marvel films. So they have to make big deals, and their plan is to have more original content like Stranger Things and all these like one-off movies they make that are Netflix originals. So it's a positive sign for stuff getting made that doesn't have to go through the studios and doesn't have to go through all the normal channels of the MPAA ratings and getting feedback and getting cut to pieces by studio execs. But
the shows that they don't have right now, which I guess the Fuller House is the closest thing to that. As I see people talk about all the time, and I do this too, like right now we're watching Cheers. Yeah. I'm not Cheers, Frasier. My wife's watching Frasier, and I'm coming in, or she watches at night and stuff, so I've been watching a little bit at a time. But before that, watched all of Cheers. A lot of people will go through and watch all of Friends.
Yeah.
So they don't have any of those series that people are going to keep watching that are just kind of the sitcom TVs where you can come in and out of episodes.
Yeah.
It's like you rewatch something like, I don't know, Twin Peaks, or if you're really wanting to watch that show, you're going to watch it from beginning to end and be like, okay, I've only got an hour, I'll just watch this episode. But that those kind of like older sitcoms you can just turn on and you're fine if you miss an episode or two. So it'll be interesting if they do any of those, because that's the shows I can see people watching over and over, and they could get a long life out of. Like 20 years later, they say, "Oh, let's watch this old Netflix like sitcom or whatever." But those really aren't. I don't know. I guess people would binge those too if they just started releasing some high quality sitcoms.
Because most of their stuff has been like serialized shows.
Yeah.
Where you have something like Stranger Things or the Marvel movie or the Marvel series like Daredevil and Jessica Jones and all that. Like you had like Wet Hot American Summer, the Arrested Development reboot. Like
It's like people watch comedies over and over. Who's gonna watch Stranger Things as much as people watch? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like
a lot of those shows
they're building their content, but are people gonna revisit a lot of these dramas as much as they revisit something like Friends or all that? Like I see their game plan, but it's going to be hard for them to just stop doing this all of a sudden, you know, if they're still like bleeding money.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. See other news on talking about series Ash versus Evil Dead. The season 3 is done shooting, and I saw like a wrap photo of like all the cast on set. So it's done shooting. It's just there's not been a announced release date. And in prior years, like the show's first season, they had a trailer at Comic-Con and had a release date announced in October. This year, they haven't had a trailer release yet, and they haven't announced a release date. And I think recently somebody asked Bruce Campbell what the release date would be, and he said, if you find out, let me know. And his estimate was fall of this year or first quarter of 2018. And like, there's some speculation they want to clear the table, not have it compete directly with The Walking Dead and Stranger Things season 2 and all that stuff that'll be coming out in October. But there's no release date information on when it's coming out.
We should just ask him when we see him.
Yeah, he's going to do, Last Man Standing is a promo tour for his new book. So it's going to be here in Louisville. So I know that, so Sean, like you and your wife Nicole are going, then I'm going and Julie's going too. So we'll be seeing
that. It's like a game show thing. I don't know exactly what all it is, but I think it's going to be on some network. You know, not tonight, but this is like a live show. Yeah. But I think it's actually a show he's going to be hosting.
Yeah, I saw like casting notices for it a while back, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. I didn't realize it was in Louisville, or else I would have looked more into it. But yeah, so we'll have to wait to see if there's a release date. Like, I mean, I'm excited to see another season of the show, but when you start getting wishy-washy with the release dates of the season, then that's like, okay, do they have full confidence in this show going forward? I mean, the fact that we even got the show to begin with is amazing and awesome. But, you know, like, so how many more seasons are they going to be able to get out of the show? I mean, how the ratings are doing. Like, the ratings for, like, a Star series are kind of hard to compare because it's just a small network relative to others that, like, 500,000 people is a pretty good audience for a show on, like, a network like them versus, you know, like, Game of Thrones and HBO is getting 22 million people an episode, but they also have a huge budget and a huge subscriber base. But
I can't imagine we got more Evil Dead and Twin Peaks. Yeah, you know what I mean? Stars and Showtime.
If you had told me in like when I was a freshman in high school that, you know, after having watched The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army Darkness like 100 times, that there would be a TV series that came out in 2015.
Yeah,
I'd be like, no way.
It's like, how is he gonna be then?
But yeah,
and it was good.
Yeah, so the fact we got it all was amazing. Hopefully they can keep doing more seasons. Hopefully the show is doing well enough for them financially.
What's Sam Raimi doing now? Because I mean, come on now, just, you know, Sam, just give us another movie. If this is if season 3, if they kind of lose confidence and they feel like it's run its course on their network, you know, give us a movie here.
See, the most recent things on his filmography is he's the executive producer on a TV series called Noir that's not out yet.
Go back to his director stuff real quick because that's on producers right now. Yeah, I want to see him back behind the camera soon because...
So there's some short called The Black Gandala.
Is that animated?
It looks like it's animated. There's World War III, which is like a in development project, like a sci-fi project that I've heard stuff about, really seen anything on. And then he's also listed on The Prophet, which is a remake of the French film A Prophet, which centers on the exploits of a young man in prison. So some projects that don't seem like they're solidified and shooting or anything, just stuff that's been in development.
And he's not on that track of, you know, he did Spider-Man, then he did The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, he seems like he's kind of, he's not somebody that Hollywood is running to for their biggest of projects anymore. So you could see if those fizzled out, him saying, okay, let's do this. I had fun making Evil Dead. And
yeah, because he directed the pilot episode or the premiere episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead, produced stuff like Don't Breathe. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we can see more Sam Raimi stuff here in the near future, but we'll have to keep an eye out. So last other bit of news, or I guess there's a couple of news. The runtime is going to be an hour or 135 minutes, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Or no, is that right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was over 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
120 minutes is 2 hours. So yeah. 2 hours and 15
Math
minutes.
hard in the morning. Dumb. But yeah, so the runtime is over 2 hours, so it puts it in the same length as like the Marvel movies, and a lot of your average blockbuster these days are over 2 hours, which is fine when it's justified by the story and what's being told. It's not so great when you got a big drink and then you're 2 hours and you're getting close to the end of the movie and you're like, I gotta pee.
Yeah.
But then you have to make the decision, like, do you hold it? Or do you make the run and hope you don't miss like a key moment?
I used to be able to hold it. I'm getting older now, and now I just say, I guess I'll just have to miss this moment. Like I do it all. Every film I go see, almost have to run out.
So like, I mean, to the fact that the original series or the It mini series, it was like the 2 episodes or whatever. I think it was like the runtime was like over 3 hours. It's like 3 hours and 15 minutes, something like that. So like when commercials and stuff, like when it aired on TV, it was always like 4 hours. But like, you commercial breaks and got broken into chunks. 'Cause that's the way most people watched it, I would think, because it's not available on streaming services. Because Julie had asked me about watching it before the new one comes out. And I was like, well, it's not on Amazon or Netflix. So you have to buy a copy. And yeah, so like,
And who's doing that if it's not on stream?
so it's over 2 hours, but based on the fact that there's gonna be a second film, so I mean that does make sense to some extent. It seems they're gonna flesh some of the stuff out compared to the Dark Tower, which is the recent Stephen King adaptation that came in at like an hour and a half or like an hour and 35 minutes, and people are complaining that was too short.
Yeah, and it's that's a different beast too, because that's like a semi-sequel or something weird.
The Dark Tower,
Yeah.
it's like, well, it's an adaptation that I don't know that
It continue. It's like it's not. I don't know. It does something weird. They said it's like a semi-sequel to that story, but like I'm glad to hear that, because it means that they're not just rushing through and they are just trying to make a jump scare movie that's 90 minutes. You know what I mean? Like it sounds like they're going to spend time on some of the characters and stuff, and and honestly, it's got me thinking about like Game of Thrones this season. They've been blowing through, the season's shorter. They've been blowing through, and like things you would normally expect to take three episodes to happen
happens in the course of one.
Yeah, happens in the course of the one or the very next episode. Like, so, and I was thinking about how I like that, and really, it's at this point of that series, we have got so much time with these characters that we do know these characters really well now.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay. But at the same time, like I like taking the time and just sprinkling more character building, relationship stuff in between all that. So there is some, but again, it's had me thinking about that. So there's something to be said for kind of taking your time and doing that work to build the characters, because it makes those moments mean so much more.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, if I hear there's a long horror film, if I hear it's good and justified, then
yeah, good.
Then that means it's going to be meatier and kind of more to grab onto than your 90-minute jump scare.
I think that a lot of people kind of grown tired over the years of the quote-unquote slow burn horror film that has a runtime of close to 2 hours or more. And this movie seems like it looks like it's going to have a lot of scares peppered in. And, it has like kind of the throwback 80s feel, which is in vogue now because of Stranger Things and all the 80s nostalgia that's been present in movies for the past 5 years or so. I mean, longer than that, but like the big, like, noticeable trend with like a John Carpenter-esque synth score, throwback visuals, references to Spielberg and Star Wars and stuff like that. Like, that's been really popular for about the past 5 years or so. So this movie, like, it's going to be the kind of like culmination of that trend, and it even has one of the kids from Stranger Things in it. So I think it'll be a big hit, and the runtime I don't think looks like it's going to be a deterrent for that or anything. It just, hopefully, like based on everything I've seen, it looks like it should be, they wouldn't be putting such a promotional push behind it, I don't think, if they thought it wasn't strong and if it didn't test well.
And we just saw that Annabelle Creation, there's going to be like a 4-minute featurette or something on it, which we don't want to see because the
you're gonna
movie
see
comes
the
out in
movie,
like a
just watch
month.
it.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil any more of kind of jump scares or anything like that, but yeah, because they're doing that, again, that just kind of another vote of confidence that, or they spent a lot of money and they're really trying to get that first weekend push.
Really hoping. Yeah, so other brief news, we go into what we've been watching. Volumes of Blood Horror Stories is available now on Blu-ray and DVD. You can buy it now, which is the movie that Sean directed a segment in, and some of the others like Chad and I and your wife Nicole, like we helped on some of the stuff on set. Then we did a behind-the-scenes video that's on the Blu-ray and DVD. So you can check that out. You can get it from Best Buy and Deep Discount DVD and Barnes & Noble and a few other places. So if you just search for Volumes of Blood Horror Stories Blu-ray, you can find a copy of it online. I think video on demand will be going up at the beginning of September.
Yeah. What is it, like $16 or something for the Blu-ray?
Yeah, it depends on the different... They've had different sales and stuff, but it's been around $20 or less for like the Blu-ray.
Yeah. Which I think $16, independent film. Again, it's like a 2-hour movie. But, you know...
It's an anthology.
I'm happy that they were able to get it out at that price.
Yeah.
Because, you don't want to spend $25. People can only buy so many movies, you know. And there's a lot of things, I guess, you know, that are trying to pull people's wallets. Yeah. You know, there's so much content out there. So $15, $16 is a good price for that.
And that's something, too, where I don't know that it's going to end up like on a Netflix per se. It may end up on Amazon Prime at some point, like a year from now or something.
The first one is...
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the route, the independent horror, at least, out of people that I've seen that have made stuff in the region, is that you do your disc release on DVD and Blu-ray, and then after that's kind of died down, then you put on Amazon Prime, which, you know, Netflix, you have to pay them to submit a film unless you're going to like a bigger studio or a bigger production company or releasing company. You have to pay them for them to look at your film and decide if they want it or not. And they typically give you an offer. It's like, 5-year exclusive rights for X amount of dollars.
Yeah. And
usually for independent films, it isn't that much. Amazon Prime, as long as you have a closed captioning file and you have like it formatted correctly, you can upload it to Amazon Prime, and people can then watch it, and you get paid back per hour of viewing. But it's like it's not much.
Yeah.
So it takes millions of hours being racked up to really get any money back from it.
Yeah.
But you can get your stuff out there in front of a wide audience. So if anything, most independent films end up on Amazon Prime like a year or so after they're out. Like once their disc release have kind of weaned off and kind of died out, and everybody who wanted to buy it on disc did. But like Netflix...
It's a great venue just to get your stuff seen. You know, like especially this, they made a sequel. The first one connects to it. You don't have to have seen it, but... It can be confusing, you know. It'll help. It's an anthology film, so the wraparound is what connects, and not that it's like the end all be all to the story, because there's individual segments in there. But you can watch that first one on Prime. A couple of the same directors are back, I think.
So if you watch the original one on Amazon Prime, so Nathan Thomas Milner's been on the podcast a few times, directed a sequence in the original and 2 sequences in the sequel in Horror Stories. And
then he wrote another one in Horror Stories. He wrote the Haters one.
Oh, yeah. And then...
and he's in it.
Then, like, PJ, I think, kind of directed some of the stuff across both of them.
Yeah,
He's
he directed,
producer.
I did a segment like a Trick or Treat, and then he directed... He ended up adding in a scene that was right before it that also takes place on Halloween.
Yeah.
Up until it cuts to the point where we show footage of Hazard, which you directed. It's on TV because he needed something on the TV because he wrote the script for mine. And then I just worked with him to make some changes and stuff.
Yeah, so we slipped in one of our shorts because it's something we had the rights to because we made it.
Yeah.
And that was just, so you can check that out.
It wasn't Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, which is far too overused across all kinds of movies. Yeah, so you can check that out now. It's available. Like I said, you can find it on Best Buy and Barnes & Noble, or you can just search Volumes of Blood Horror Stories Blu-ray or DVD on Google, and I'm sure you can find links to buy it at all the sites. So you can check that out. In terms of things we've been watching, so I actually just remembered I did watch Train to Busan Friday night. Watched that with Julie, and she really liked it. And I liked it too. Like, I didn't love it. I enjoyed it because we were trying to go through and figure out, like, because we were just going to watch a movie. So we were looking at Amazon Prime and Netflix and HBO and everything. It's like, what can we watch? And then we were going back and forth for like 20 minutes. And I was like, she mentioned Train to Busan early on. So it's like, okay, we're just going to watch that. Let's stop spending 30 minutes because it's getting late. I want to watch a movie.
Yeah.
So then we watched that, and I enjoyed it. Like, it was, South Korean zombie film. or more infected, because they're running zombies that are infected more than straight like Romero zombies. And it was, pretty action packed. There was all kinds of, there was tons of bodies and tons of zombies. It's mostly just a guy has a young daughter that for her birthday wants to go see like his estranged wife, who is her mom. So they get on the train to go to Busan, which is where the mom is at. And while they're on the train, like an outbreak of infection happens, and then they have to, try to safely make it to that location. And there's tons of infected running around, and the special effects in it were really good. And a lot of the acting for the zombies was really good. And it was, even though it was about 2 hours long, it was pretty fast paced still. And, I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's all subtitles, which, that's usually the case with most import films like that. It's not like Okja or something where it's kind of like a mishmash, half English, half
it's
Korean
a South
film.
Korean film through and through.
But it's pretty straightforward narrative. Like the effects in it are good. Like I enjoyed it. The only issue is like, and it really wasn't an issue as much as just there's a lot of stuff they telegraph in the beginning that is going to be important later.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that. A lot of films, like we talk about Hush, like telegraphed a bunch of stuff big time with like close-ups on very specific things. So
in that film, there wasn't a lot happening other than, it was a lot of silent storytelling in that anyway. So it's like it stood out even more in that film.
So in Train to Busan, like all that really wasn't a huge negative or anything. It was just something I noticed.
Yeah, it was maybe just something maybe pulled you out of it because it was so apparent. It wasn't kind of hidden foreshadowing or anything like that.
Yeah, I still enjoyed it.
I remember some of that popping up too.
Yeah, so like if you want a zombie film that's not like a Romero ripoff or anything, it's more and it doesn't really go too far into like the South Korean culture differences that might exist between like America and South Korea. It's mostly just there's on a train, there's a kind of infected / zombie breakout, and then you have like a small number of characters that are having to deal with it. And it didn't feel like, like we talked about other movies like The Host or stuff like that. Like those movies feel a lot more quirky. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this was much more straightforward.
Yeah.
And aside from the subtitles, if you just had it in English, it'd be a pretty straightforward film with, you could, if they were just speaking English instead of Korean, the average film goer would probably watch it and have no problems whatsoever. Because like there's some people that for some weird reason hate subtitles, and I don't really get that. Because subtitles, like, you can... Well, I guess, too, you have to keep your eyes on the screen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you don't have to...
You're just missing out on other types of films. You know what I mean? And other types of perspectives and story. Again, even The Host, there's this different type of quirk to that film and a lot of his films that, it's just his vision, and you would be totally unaware of that if you ever didn't give it a chance. You may like it, you may not, but it may be a sense of personality that you just... may line up with you, but if you don't, at least just try it. But yeah, I like Train to Busan a whole lot. Like I watched it last year before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So, we had like so many films to catch up on. I was like, okay, I'll watch these films because I think I might like those anyway.
Yeah.
And I didn't say you guys had to watch it because I was like, I don't think it's going to be the best film of the year that we're going to call.
Yeah.
It wasn't a contender to be one of the top spots, but for me, it was like. Being tired of the zombie genre at this point, I enjoyed it, and that was a huge feat. Like I really liked it. I've thought about watching it again. I haven't really, but also too, it's not 2 hours stuck on the train. They get off, they get out. Yeah, it's not like you feel like you're just claustrophobically trapped in there. There's a lot going on, and two, it is like a Romero film in that it's all about human relationships and people getting there's assholes on the train. You know what I mean? They're out to save their own skin and stuff like that. So it's entertaining. There's a lot of different things going on. There's not just everybody trying to escape or fight off zombies. It's also they're battling against other humans that are, so there's a lot of things going on. And I thought it was a great film too. I'm glad you guys at least checked it out.
Yep. So, aside from the podcast and like TV shows like Twin Peaks, we're still doing the weekly videos about Twin Peaks, watch like Game of Thrones, but aside from Train to Busan, I don't really get a chance to watch anything aside from Blue Velvet.
Yeah, I won't dig into too much Lynch because we'll be talking about Blue Velvet, but I watched Firewalk with Me again, even though I just watched it recently, and then watched some more of like the original Twin Peaks. Let's see. Also, last night we were looking for something to watch, and we were laying in bed, but we weren't going to sleep yet. And normally she puts it on when we watch Frasier.
Yeah.
And I was like, just don't put on Frasier. Like, we've been watching that so much. I'm like, just put on something different because I'm kind of like awake right now. So she put on, I think it's called The Keepers. It's a documentary series.
It's a
Have you watched
docuseries
any
on
of that?
Netflix. I've watched most of the episodes. I still haven't watched the last one.
Yeah, we just watched the first episode. It's true crime documentary. So
About the death of a nun
yeah,
in like the late 60s.
yeah, not connected to The Conjuring.
No.
Too.
Yeah, no supernatural elements.
Yeah,
just,
again, we've talked about that. It's kind of weird. True crime is entertainment, and not that it's entertaining, but it's like watching it too. I kind of had that emotion where it's like, okay, I keep a distance from it because it's somebody's life, but then it's like, okay, I'm watching this show. Why am I watching it? Well, because we like mysteries.
Yeah.
Like everybody. I mean, humans like mysteries.
Yeah.
They're drawn to it, and it's like, okay, well, do I let myself get wrapped up in this and think, ooh, do I try to let myself like be intrigued by the mystery of it and have fun with it? You know what I mean? It's a weird thing, and it's like, am I watching the show for enjoyment, or am I watching it because like, why am I watching it? And that, I don't know. It's a weird thing. We're gonna keep watching it, obviously, but. It's just a weird line, to toe. And I was like, well, what if they just made this into like a film or a series?
Yeah.
You could see like Fincher, like it felt like Fincher's like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo or something like that, where like there's this mystery. It's it's like in the 60s or whatever. Like it kind of gave me that vibe. Of course, it's a documentary, not a high budget documentary. It seems like It seems like minimal crew and stuff like that. But then again, if you do a feature film of that, like. Okay, that's at least removes you a little bit from some of the characters. So then it's like, then you can kind of fall into it more. I don't know. I always have a weird battle with that, with true crime.
With like the true crime stuff, so you have like The Keepers was set in the late 60s. So some of the people involved in this are still alive and around today. But if you get something more recent like Serial, the podcast that was about like the recent, making a murderer that was on Netflix and was a huge thing. Like where that guy's still in prison, and a lot of people involved in that case or on that documentary are still like out and about in the world today. So like when you watch we've been doing like the Twin Peaks videos, we're talking about like, oh, who did this? Is this person did they kill somebody? Stuff like that. You're about like a fictional show. Mm-hmm. But the true crime stuff has people doing that same type of speculation about real world events and real life people that you in some cases can look up on Facebook and send a message to this person that exists.
And your perspective is also shaped by the documentary filmmakers on how they present all of that, because it's all, it's not like completely, subjective filmmaking. That was the thing. I went to a thing on VR and 360 degree cameras and VR storytelling and filmmaking. And that's what one of the documentary storytellers there, I think I don't know if it was Sundance or what, but she said, she feels that 360 degree and VR documentaries are like more objective than traditional, because you always got to figure out where to place the camera, what cuts to use.
Yeah.
If you place somebody in the environment and let them look around and watch it as it goes, that's something totally different. So it's like the cuts, the music they use, everything shapes your opinion, and that's all formed by their opinion, or maybe not their opinion, but how they want to shape that story. And two, I may be like overly like sensitive to that stuff because I worked in TV news forever, or 6 years, and it was always like, okay, well, we got to go interview these people. They just lost their kid, and it's like, okay, well, now we've got to, put this story in. Well, what elements do we put in? Okay, well, are we going to put a shot of them crying here? You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, well, this would be good for the story.
Because you construct
why are we doing this for the story? Is it good to get more people calling in to try to find, answers for them?
Yeah.
Or are we cutting this in because it's good TV? You know what I mean? Like, it was always a weird thing.
Are you crafting like a story that's meant to do like, to craft a narrative and get people involved and evoke like a story type telling, or is, versus just relaying facts?
Relaying facts and trying to get an answer for these people. And that was always like a struggle for me. Like, I always try to, you might have reporters that will push you for the tears and like the emotional part, because that's why they did it. They like to be storytellers on that end. But for me, it was like always towing a line. And that's why I never really like loved it that much because there was always a struggle for me where I couldn't like feel like I could be super creative and have fun with some of these stories.
Yeah.
And also feel good about it, you know? So I think that's why I'm like overly analytical of the true crime stuff.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to watch. And yeah, when it's something this old too, these people are still alive. They're still affected by it, you know, minor spoiler. But one guy said, you know, when he saw his sister, you know, dead, that's the only image he has of her in his mind. You know what I mean? And it's like, these people are still alive and it's still affecting them. And yeah, you can still contact these people and all that. So I do feel better about it when it's further back because you feel like things said today and the documentary maybe won't shape the narrative as much.
Yeah.
Like Serial. You know what I mean? Like it has shaped kind of.
It's like Making a Murderer.
Making the
like,
Murderer.
That was like a big
yeah.
deal. Like Serial's like still going on. Like in like both cases, like Serial and Making a Murderer, like they've tried to, you know, appeal things on behalf of like the people that are in prison that the shows focus on. So there's all kinds of implications of what true crime stuff means. And two, like, you know, and some of the stuff like vicious murders and rapes and things like that, like, does it trivialize that type of stuff? Mm-hmm. And then does that, like, it's a fine line to toe because then you see like movies and TV shows like Scream, the MTV series, like had a character that was doing a podcast, kind of like Serial, like going into the murders of the prior season. Not handled all that well, but
as most of that show was not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care to watch that show. I didn't finish season 2 because I just got bored by it. But yeah, so we'll have to wait and you know, I think too like the big thing for a lot of streaming services now, those docuseries can be huge business, and they don't cost that much money to make, and it's a way for filmmakers to kind of dip their feet into that pool if you can get a good product together.
And again, you know, that's the weird thing about it too. It's like, okay, it's a product for the streaming services.
Yeah.
It's something that the filmmaker, like, what's the filmmaker's intent behind it? Like, I think the way I would really get into some of these, if I knew the filmmakers, not like personally, but if I was grown to know their work and maybe interviews and like, okay, they're doing this for the right reasons. Yeah. I will watch all of their stuff.
They're not doing it just to make a buck. And
and then I can kind of feel better about watching, even if I do get some like quote unquote enjoyment out of it or some sort of satisfaction to the mystery. At least I know that, you know, somewhere down the line there's like really good intent, and it's not just to like, ooh, this is a good story. Let's you know, let's do this. So the other movie I watched was Detroit.
New movie from Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah, another, you know, again, it was a fictionalized version of true events, which also people are still around from that, from the 60s. I should have looked up more about this before the podcast, but I actually had forgot that I had watched it. And that's only because I'd watched it like Friday night, I think, and had a busy day yesterday. Not because the film wasn't good, because I really liked it. There's been a lot of articles written about this film too, and even some of the reviews, like some of them swing more towards the negative and some are highly positive. Like, and I think it really does also come down to, you know, the story behind it. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's not like a perfect film, but kind of the story it's telling, it gets a pass for me in a lot of ways. So basically there was, you know, riots in Detroit in the 60s, and then there was, I think, the Algiers Hotel. Essentially there was an incident there. And I don't want to give away too much else, but the film kind of focused around the Algiers Hotel and the incidents that happened there, the specific incident. And I think the events in the film are maybe taken from as much documentation as they were able to get based on what happened. But at the same time, I think a book was written by some of the people that were involved in that. But I think they agreed to do the book if it was promised to never be made into a movie. Yeah. So they couldn't get the rights to the book, but they got they correlated some other information. So for me, you know, I've heard some people complain that like, oh, it almost feels like a bit repetitive at points, or, you know, or it's maybe there's not as much tension as there should be. But also watching it, I was even thinking about that. Like, okay, we're kind of staying in this space for a while. But I was like, you know, I give that a pass because there's more to it than it being a totally fictionalized event. If it was a totally fictionalized event, I'd be like, well, why don't they move things forward now? Or why don't they do this? But for me, it's like, I'm almost fine if it presented at a a pace that isn't a normal genre film or something like that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the coin, some people have criticized it of being too much of like a genre film. You know, they've said it's been like, I can't think of the name of it, but essentially, you know, people being trapped in a place, you know, and it's like, oh, there's just horrors going on in this place and they're trapped in it. So it feels like a genre film in that way. For me, I didn't feel like it was. I didn't feel like it was exploitative in that way at all. Especially looking at her past work, you know, she did Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker, like
Point Break.
Yeah, that and that's it too. She did Point Break, Near Dark. She's getting away from those genre films that she did before.
Doing more real life stories.
Yes, and I feel like, you know, they are coming from a good place from her, whether or not they're home runs or whatever. But I really enjoyed the film. After it was over, people were pretty quiet.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, because it is just it's a huge bummer.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to get people to go watch films like that if they know it's a bummer. But it's also, it can be entertaining in some regards because it sets you in the place of the 60s. And it's not all this one incident. Like, it takes a while to even get there.
Yeah.
So you get to kind of live in Detroit for a little bit, and you're not in like one confined space, and you kind of get to see maybe a little bit of lives of a lot of people involved in that event, from the police officers and the citizens and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I totally get people's criticisms on both sides, and that's why it's a weird thing that I almost give a lot of it a pass.
Yeah.
But for me, it also feels like the most important film I've seen this year.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite film, but it's a film that I think people should definitely see, even if you don't go to the theaters to see it. Definitely watch it at some point because it is real history, and it can kind of give you some context. Like it literally starts out like talking about, I think a mass migration in like the 1910s.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of people, African Americans, like moved to bigger cities and like Detroit, and then a lot of the white for jobs and opportunities because, you know, it was like land of opportunity. And then a lot of white people moved out of the cities to the suburbs because of, you know, racism or whatever, you know, or I think in Louisville, a lot of the property value went down when people had moved into, like, say, the West End, and the property value went down. It wasn't because of any other reason. I assume because there was prejudice. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why the West End of Louisville now is predominantly black, because a lot of the white people moved out because they were afraid their property value would go down. Even if they didn't mind having a mixed neighborhood, some of them were like, "Oh, my property's good."
Well, people like took a possible perception and turned it into reality.
Yes, exactly.
And
so
you see that in a lot of cities, like urban sprawl, and you see like the suburbs, and a lot of stuff you see happen like that, where people like think something will happen and then they make it so by acting in a certain manner.
Yes. So I really like that this film set up that, like, it does it like within the first few minutes of the film, and it uses like little illustrations and just some text. Yeah. And I love that it set that context, and it's like, this situation just wasn't made because certain people started rioting out of nowhere, or you know what I mean? Like, it was, and I almost, like, this film was over 2 hours. I would have been fine if it was like 5 hours because it felt like a documentary. It's all handheld and stuff like that. And maybe some of it's a little shaky for me but also sometimes I think that's maybe the intent. You know, like I give a lot of this film a pass, but I absolutely think everybody should check out this movie because it can give you a context on a lot of things. Not a perfect film, but very engaging. John Boyega's in it. Yeah. Very, very good. I mean, the acting I think is very good in it. It's super... again, I think it's super satisfying to watch because it's a really important film. Yeah. I'm a lot of good movies coming out this year, and I appreciate films like this more than like War of the Planet of the Apes, my favorite film so far. Yeah. But you know, even though that's like obviously a fictional account, it also touches on some real things and makes you think about humanity and life and everything. So it has some real counterpoints to it. This goes further, but then you've also got films that totally kind of don't even make you bat an eye at that. Maybe like Baby Driver. You know what I mean? Like, it has a little stuff in that for genre convention. Yeah. But enjoyable on different levels. So I just love, there's been so many great films and so many like range of films, but that's on the other spectrum of it. Yeah. You know, closer to the true crime stuff, but a little bit below.
Yep. So I think that'll wrap up our discussion of what we've been watching. So now moving to our review of the 1986 film from David Lynch, Blue Velvet. And I guess we'll just be discussing spoilers throughout, because it's from '86, so it's relatively older movie. It's pretty straightforward too, and it's available. I think everyone watched it on Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah, I had the disc,
Okay.
so I watched it on that because I watched the special features.
So you can watch it on Amazon Prime, and then I think I have a disc copy somewhere. I just watched it on Prime because even like the streaming services, a lot of times it's easier just to watch them on there than it is to go dig out a DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, and the reason I dug mine out is because I knew I'd be watching I wanted to watch some special features on it to rewatch those for this. But yeah, I think I actually did watch the first 20 minutes on streaming, and then went and got my disc.
Let's see. So the basic plot synopsis from IMDb is the discovery of a severed human ear found in a field leads a young man on an investigation related to a beautiful, mysterious nightclub singer and a group of psychopathic criminals who have kidnapped her child. So, I mean, that's even a little bit of a spoiler in of itself, but...
Yeah, that is.
But the movie starred Kyle MacLachlan, Dennis Hopper, Isabella Rossellini, Laura Dern, and you do see some other, like, Lynch and Twin Peaks alumni, like Jack Nance is in it in, like, a smaller role. And
Miss Tremont.
Yeah, Miss Tremont.
Yeah, Tremont.
Frances Bay. So you see people
Her
who...
name's Bay. Oh, B-A-Y, not B-A-E.
Yeah, not like Bay. Brand Dourif is in it.
Yeah.
So you see some familiar faces, and you see a lot of the Lynchisms that would go to kind of define a lot of his other movies and his visual style here, because he'd had films before that. But this was kind of the one that I think kind of started to solidify like what his style was. Because you had dream sequences in it that were, kind of hinting at what you would see in Twin Peaks. And, of course, that Kyle MacLachlan in it when he was young. But this was after David Lynch had made Dune, which where he worked with MacLachlan for the first time. And it's funny because MacLachlan's very much doing like the young man voice. Because there's a lot of actors, like, I guess you try to go for, like, a higher pitch sound versus, like, because this was in '86, which wasn't that long before Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And then Laura Dern, I think at the time the movie was made, was, like, 19 or something. She was super young.
Yeah, she auditioned when she was 17, I think they said, or, according to her interview on there. This film also kind of we're not going to like go all Twin Peaks, but it also mirrors that in that the film is about kind of this small town. Also, it's a logging town. Well, it's this small town that it seems like this idyllic like 60s era, even though it's not set in the 60s. It's like Lynch's aesthetic a lot of times. Is that
it's like a throwback to prior, because Twin Peaks is very much like kind of 1950s as.
Yeah, even though it was set in the early 90s.
Yeah, or the late 80s.
Yeah.
I forgot what the exact dates were.
But so you see this kind of ideal, like Leave It to Beaver type community and just kind of world. But then as the characters start to find out, things aren't what they seem on the surface, and there's also a darker reality and a darkness to the world. And it's for this, it's almost like a coming of age where they are discovering kind of the darkness of the world. Where Twin Peaks, it's adults doing it, and some of the adults know about these things before, but this is people just finding out there's a lot more to the world than what it seems.
Like you said, like the theme that runs through a lot of David Lynch's work is the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic Americana towns that seemingly represent like all that's good and have like strong values and like community, and there's this deep or like seedy underbelly that's going on that of darkness. And in this, it's just like crime and drugs and crooked cops and just kind of scumbag criminals
and Frank
rapists.
Being like the embodiment of the weirdest, most evil person I think that you could imagine for this film.
Why there have to be men in the world like Frank?
Yep.
Which is an iconic line that is like a lot of people are aware of elements of this movie without having watched this movie. Because like Dennis Hopper has a line where he asks Kyle MacLachlan's character like, "What do you like to drink?" And he says Heineken. He's like, "Heineken." He's like, "Fuck Heineken." Pabst Blue Ribbon. So a lot of people are
shit, I believe.
or a lot of people are aware of like somebody yelling Pabst Blue Ribbon and like saying stuff about Heineken. It's like a lot of people are aware of that. And aware of like the line like why there have to be men in this world like Frank. Like there's people who are aware of like those lines because they've been referenced in other things without having actually watched this movie. And the movie too has a lot of Lynch-isms, like the scene of like you see headlights on the road driving at night, and a lot of things you see reappear in his work, even in the more recent Twin Peaks: The Return you've seen. So you see a lot of the stylistic things he did kind of kick into high gear really with that movie, because he had done like Eraserhead and The Elephant Man and Dune before this, before feature films, before Blue Velvet. Because was it Eraserhead was 1977, Elephant Man was 1980, Dune was 84, and then Blue Velvet was 86. And then you saw like Wild at Heart in 90 and Twin Peaks and Firewalk with Me and stuff like that. But like Blue Velvet was something that like I was reading up on the history of it, and as you can imagine, when that movie came out in the 80s, it was quite controversial in terms of some people loved it and some people hated it. And like there are people who like walked out of it and people who booed and stuff because it wasn't a standard like 80s thriller. Because a lot of the 80s, there was kind of those schlocky genre B grade movie thrillers that in and of themselves are fine and enjoyable. And like something like the recent movie The Guest was kind of like a throwback to those types of movies. Because like you had a lot of stuff in the 80s, like I said, like those kind of schlocky thrillers. And this was not that at all. Like it was more subdued, and you had like the horrors that were happening on screen. Like there was some violence in it, and there was like sexual violence and things like that, which to a lot of people are more disturbing than Friday the 13th sequel with Jason just slashing teens or something. But if people went into it expecting it to be more of a horror film or more of a thriller film, and it was, there were thrilling elements in it, especially towards the end of the film. But it was not.
It almost feels like it feels very Hitchcockian in some ways, and so as far as the mystery goes, you got these two people kind of trying to figure out this mystery, and even it's the environment they're in is almost like a lot of Hitchcock environment. You know what I mean? Like this very idealized version, but also there is some seedy underbelly. And Hitchcock, this the seedy stuff was Psycho, which was. One example was wild, and the finale of that film was shocking. Yeah. But in this, it's taken to a whole new level. Yeah. The things he does to Isabella Rossellini, beating her and
because basically Frank has kidnapped her husband and child and is making her do sexual things with him. For him not to kill them and for her to theoretically get her child back and all that. And Kyle MacLachlan's character and Laura Dern's character, they found the ear, or Kyle MacLachlan's character, I keep just saying his character, look at the character name, the character, Jeffrey, finds the ear and then talks to Laura Dern's character, Sandy, and she mentions something about the singer at the club or whatever, and they kind of start investigating on their own
because her dad's a detective. He gave the ear to and all that. Yeah.
So then Jeffrey kind of gets when they're stalking or when he's scoping out her apartment and breaking in because they stole a key from her or a key to her apartment at the club. She comes in and he's kind of like watching her from the closet, and she like pulls a knife on him and starts, giving him fellatio. And then Dennis Hopper's character Frank comes in, so he has to hide in the closet and watch as he comes in and like assaults her and all kinds of stuff.
He's like helpless and naked and afraid in a
closet.
Yeah, and two, it's like before that, he's a college student coming home. Laura Dern's character's in high school, and it's almost like he's the one like, talking about beer to her, and it feels like he's the one that is
the corrupting influence.
Yeah, the corrupting influence. And then all of a sudden he realizes the things in the world that he hasn't been involved in or aware of yet until this moment. And as soon as Dennis Hopper comes on screen, like he commands every scene he's in. And I think they use him just enough. Like as much as I would love to see 2 hours of Frank. Yeah. Like I love the mystery that we only see so much of him.
If you saw him too much, it would lose the effectiveness.
Yes.
If you see like the moments where he's not, quote unquote on and, involved in the violence and the crime and all that. If you saw like the standard day-to-day life moments, I think they could take away from what you're seeing the character. If you see too much of that stuff.
Or if he was amped up all the time. It's like the shark from Jaws. You know what I mean? Like they use him just enough. But every time he's on screen, it's like, you're terrified. You know,
Yeah.
it's like his performance is amazing. But yeah, for me, I feel like I like the last half of this better than the first, but I've watched the first half so many times because I love the mystery and how it starts out too. Like it feels like there's almost two films here, and maybe it is like the first part is this kind of innocent little mystery that they're getting involved in. They found the ear, and it's kind of like, you know, it's intriguing and fun, and then all of a sudden, as soon as he sees Frank, it no longer turns fun, you know, but he's still like, but then he's involved because, you know, he kind of knows what's happening with her character.
From the beginning of the movie to the point that he is in the apartment and gets Jeffrey gets stuck in the closet and has to watch all this stuff. From the beginning to that point, that's when you could have had it veer off into the standard kind of thriller B-movie genre type stuff. But from that point forward, it's something different altogether with like the sexual violence, and then like, you know, the character of Frank kind of, you know, making Jeffrey kind of see the world that he deals with, and going to like that one apartment where there's like the weird party, and then when they attack, or when they force Jeffrey to watch Frank attack in that car, or he, you know, I guess is molesting Isabella Rossellini's character, and then, you know, when Jeffrey tries to fight back, then he gets, you know, Frank puts on lipstick and like kisses him, and then like just beats the crap out of him. Like, that's probably not what people were expecting to see have happen.
No.
And this shows you, like, with Frank, there's just a lot of stuff going on there, and you don't really know the depths, like what all he's done or would do, but you get an idea. And yeah, because it's like so the Dorothy, like, you know, and then she's like screaming for them not to hurt Jeffrey. All the while, the one woman is on top of the car dancing to music.
Yeah,
and it's a very interesting scene juxtaposing like the dancing and the music versus like the beating that's going on. And, you know, then for a while, like when you first watch it, you're like, oh, is this about to be like a graphic sexual assault of Jeffrey? And then like it doesn't really go that way. It's more just like physical attack. But, you know, it could have gone a lot of different ways, but that just made it scary because you know what's going to happen.
And after that point, he's basically, is he done with the mystery after that? Doesn't he say to, you know, his family, he's like, I'm done, it's okay. Yeah. And that's when he kind of steps away. He tells her father, you know, about the photos and everything. So it's like, once he hit that point, he was done, but he still also was a little bit, you know, pulled in based on Isabella Rossellini's character, but he did as much as he could kind of felt like he could do, or I mean, he knew his limits there. He knew things were about to get really bad.
Well, and too, like, he had sex with her at that point too, and then he had hit her, and she kind of baited him into it because that seemed to be something she was into at that period of time, and then he just felt bad about it and had like those dreams and nightmares. So, you know, he was experiencing the corrupting influence of all the stuff he was involved with, kind of, you know, rubbing off on him and making him kind of go that way. But then the sequence with him getting beat, like, could have ended in his death or worse.
Yeah.
Before death. So then that's when he kind of pulls back and goes and gives the police officer that he knows he can trust, Sandy's mom or Sandy's dad, like, all the information.
And then he slips back into kind of the more innocent world, and he goes to the dance with her. Yeah. And it's like, okay, he's resetting. But then right after that, you know, she gets chased down by her boyfriend, which means nothing to him. Like, you know, in any other film, that would have been... He didn't know who it was at first, but any other film, that would have been like, oh, this is a really huge drama moment. But it's like, for everything he's seen, it's like, it's this girl's... You know, it's her boyfriend, like
whenever is like... When she's like, oh, and it's her boyfriend's name.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like... He was just like nonplussed. He's like, oh, that's all it is?
Yeah, he was like relieved after the things he's seen.
And but then he sees... And then they see like Dorothy naked in the front yard of his house. And then like they get her in the car and everything like that. And apparently Lynch, when he was a younger child, said that I believe it was him and his brother had seen like a naked woman that was out in the street, and it had such a profound impact on him. He like never forgot it, and then actually like put it into this movie.
He talks about that too. I think Isabella Rossellini talks about it in the documentary on the disc. You know, and she said, he told me about that, and that's why she performed it kind of not covering up, because she was like, had lost all sense of shame. You know, she wasn't even herself at all. Like, she wasn't herself when he met her, but she had kind of lost all of that. So she talks about on that. Then the Lynch documentary, whatever it was, it's on Prime now.
Yeah.
I just watched recently. But he also kind of recounts that story too. So there's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, so like, and it's funny too because like the movie as a whole, I think like he wanted to make a movie. And he had like the idea of like finding an ear or something, and then like
and the song too. He heard the song Blue Velvet,
and then wrote a movie around like ideas and elements and images that he wanted to have in it. And it was through the De Laurentiis productions and things like that. And so it was like a movie that was kind of like stitched together, I guess, kind of from different ideas and concepts, and had like a movie wrapped around it. And I think they said that Dennis Hopper wasn't actually the first choice for the role, or it was like the third person that they had approached to the role, and he thought that he had to have the role. And then like he very much embodied it and gave like a very memorable character that, in terms of like on-screen villains, even though there's people that have done far worse on film, in terms of body count and things they did, like he's still like a very creepy character that leaves an impression.
Yeah, I was trying to think who like modern day villains have stacked up against him, based on their presence, like just when they show up or their performance. And it's like a lot of people talk about Heath Ledger's Joker. A lot of people talk about that. But I mean, for me, like, Dennis Hopper, like Frank is way more terrifying.
So something I would love to see, since the movie was set in the 80s and No Country for Old Men was like set in the 80s, I would love to see like Javier Bardem's Anton Chigurh interact with Frank.
Yeah. And I told Nicole, I was like, I would love to have seen, if Dennis Hopper was still around, be in the new season of Twin Peaks as a replacement for Bob in that. You know what I mean? Like a new evolution or something, because Dennis Hopper, I mean, he just like commands so much when he's on screen, especially as that character. Yeah,
and like I said, like he's a very iconic role, and it's not like caricature or something. Like he's doing a lot of stuff, and then you have like the mystery element of like, as Jeffrey's taking the pictures and investigating stuff, and that all kind of starts to tie together at the end.
And him being the well-dressed man, Frank dressing up as that, as the costume, like that feels very Hitchcocky in there as well. Like somebody wearing a wig or disguise. Like, you have all these classical tropes and elements, and it's all wrapped around kind of the story and the theme of being kind of the darker underbelly of life. You know what I mean? And our society, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, like, all the elements of the movie, like, in that aspect work, and then, like, stylistically, like I said, you see a lot of, like, it was just funny to me, because I'd rewatched, because I think I'd seen Blue Velvet before I saw Twin Peaks, and then we've been watching Twin Peaks: The Return, and, like, I hadn't rewatched Blue Velvet in a few years, and, like, it's funny how many of the same, like, techniques you see Lynch use in his current work, are in his old work, too. And you can change the cameras from film to digital and all that stuff, but it still works the same way and kind of does the same evocative type feeling. And like the only knock on the movie kind of is like once you get to the end when Jeffrey's able to shoot Frank with the gun, like in the apartment at the end, where he kind of outsmarts because he has a police radio and he realizes that he's trying to talk to Sandy's dad, and he realizes that Frank has a radio too. So then he says he's in the other room, so he can go and hide and get the gun off of the man in the yellow suit, and shoot and kill him. Like, but the ending does feel like it wraps things up. Like I think compared to any later Lynch works, it feels like the ending is wrapped up a little bit too nicely. With everybody getting the best possible ending that they could possibly have based on what occurred up to that point in the movie.
Yeah.
Because like Jeffrey and Sandy got to be a couple and happy, and like like his parents were like at her parents' house and have like a cookout at the end.
Yeah, it's almost like too good to be
and
true.
Dorothy like got her kid back.
There's not really an indication this is a dream, but it almost feels like a fantasy based on how well everything wraps up.
Because a lot of the stuff that happened to everybody, it would be really hard for a lot of them, like for Jeffrey to go back to like a normal life.
Yeah.
Because he had to kill Frank, which I mean I guess is better than any other result. Like I mean in that scenario, like Frank getting away or whatever, I think would be hard to deal with. Mm-hmm. But he killed Frank, and all the stuff he saw and was involved with. And there's like the moment too, like where Sandy realized that something happened between Jeffrey and Dorothy, and she kind of like in a very Lynchian directed moment, kind of has like the moment where she's like screaming down.
Yeah.
But then she kind of later comes around and realizes that she doesn't care that happened.
Yeah, it's almost like, I haven't read a lot of film analysis on this in a long time. you can read those. I didn't want to read too much and bring too much of that in there into this conversation, but like it almost feels like, by him killing Frank, based on the ending, was almost like him extinguishing this evil.
Yeah.
Because things wrap up so unrealistically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like as far as, like you said, the repercussions of what everybody's been through and seen.
Yeah.
It's almost like he erased him and nobody has anything to worry about anymore, which is obviously not the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does wrap up, very neatly and kind of on a very upbeat manner. But, maybe too at the time, that's what Lynch kind of, Lynch seems like a positive person.
Yeah.
All in all. You know what I mean? So maybe it was like he wanted to give some peace of mind to these characters and for people watching the film and for himself too. In this situation, and because it wasn't going to be serialized or anything like that, maybe he just felt like that was the best direction because of how much he had wrung the character and the audience through in this film. I think it was the producer or whoever was helping him work on this. I guess he worked on Dune with him, and then he stepped away. Lynch was like, I'm not doing any more studio films or whatever. And then I guess the producer came back and was like, well, what's this Blue Velvet again? Let's talk about this. And then when they screened the film, somebody said, what the hell are you going to do with this to the guy, I guess, I don't know if he's a producer or who owned the studio or whatever that was going to potentially release it. He said what I had to do was establish another company to release the film through because he, couldn't, I guess, he knew nobody would take it and couldn't release it through his label or whatever. But yeah, it's a strikingly original film from 1986 based on kind of the tone, the darkness, really just everything about it. Like, again, like you said, it solidified kind of a lot of Lynch trademarks and his vision and kind of where he was going. Like, this is a very straightforward film for him. And then we get Twin Peaks where he brings in Mark Frost. And then, he slowly starts with Lost Highway. Things start veering off a little bit.
Because like Wild at Heart was still pretty straightforward, but then like Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire
is even further. And Twin Peaks: The Return is somewhere in the middle. It's like somewhere in the middle of all those, really. Yeah. Mark Frost has obviously grounded a lot of it.
Yeah.
Or made it more out there based on what you consider grounded. Like, is Lynch stuff the most grounded thing because it deals with kind of humanity and human emotions and thoughts, where Lynch deals with, Frost deals with maybe UFOs, like.
So apparently the path this game made is that Lynch met with producer Richard Roth after The Elephant Man, and he enjoyed the script he had written for Ronnie Rocket, but didn't think it was something he wanted to produce. And this is all from Wikipedia. And he asked Lynch if he had any other scripts, but Lynch only had ideas, and the idea that he pitched to him was, I always wanted to have sneak in a girl's room and watch her into the night, and maybe at one point or another I would see something that would be a clue to a murder mystery. So then the producer Roth loved the idea and asked him to write a treatment, and then he got conditions with Dino De Laurentiis and his film company. They gave him essentially full artistic freedom and control of it compared to Dune, which is like more of a studio project. And then he just had to take a cut in salary and have a budget of $6 million.
And on there, too, it says he got final cut privileges.
Yeah.
Something else they bring up in the documentary was that he wanted final cut, and they kept saying, Lynch, I can't put this in the script or in the contract, because if we do, every other director will want final cut.
Yeah.
And then he said, but you can shake my hand on it. I never go back on my word.
Yeah.
Shake my hand, you'll get final cut, but we can't put it in there. And that's what they did, and he got final cut, which is like as happy of ending as you can be in that situation. You can see that going in the other direction.
Because like there's so many movies in recent eras where, like especially too, like a lot of shady, like smaller movies have, independent producers that provide all the cash and funding for the movie. But then they might not have all the funds in place that they claimed. And then, they don't give people the money to finish something. They take control of the project away from a director and put together a cut of the movie that's really not what the director wanted. And they don't give them the money to finish stuff. So there's a lot of things you see like that happen. But this was like the positive scenario of where, everything got brought through on the end. Like, everybody came through.
Which he had such a negative experience on Dune. You could see if this didn't come through, him walking away and just focusing on his art and music.
And finding Woody Woodpecker dolls. And
yes, yeah.
But like, so like you see like the movie like this get made, and at the time, like I think it was, if anything, like a modest success. It probably across the, globally probably made their money back, because the budget was $6 million. I think in the U.S. it grossed like around there, like 8 or so. But like, when you took into account like that was still when there was a booming video market, because you had like VHS and then DVD shortly thereafter. So it was a movie that gained cult status and gained a lot of followings. I'm sure over time has been quite profitable for them. And it's a movie now that, like, when it came out, the critical reaction was more mixed, as opposed to now it's very positive. So I think that's one of those movies that kind of had to be reassessed a little bit, years after it came out.
Yeah, they were saying, like, I guess when it initially, like, a lot of people, like, hated it and didn't like it, got negative reviews, and then, like, one critic, I don't remember who it was, said, oh, wait, you guys need to look at this again. They wrote a review and was like, this film needs to be looked at again. See it again. And then, yeah, it started to cause a wave of people to revisit it and reanalyze it. Yeah, I mean, I really, really enjoy this film. And it is, too, kind of more basic Lynch. It's a great entryway into his films. Like, even I think this is probably a better entry point than, like, Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Because Eraserhead was full creative control, because it was just...
Yeah. Well, too, yeah, so, like, it's funny just, like, a lot of the movies are like this to reassess them. And sorry if you hear, like, the sounds of planes. There's planes going over all the time for some reason today. But, it's a movie, it's fun to reassess now, because I think a lot of times when stuff comes out, because, like, John Carpenter's The Thing, when it came out in the early 80s, it came out like right around the same time as E.T., got a lot of negative reviews, but then like universally today it's pretty much praised by everyone and has a super high rating on a lot of review sites, and is pretty universally acknowledged to be a great film. And Blue Velvet was one that had some recognition at the time it came out, but it only took really until years later for it to really get the perception that it has today, where it has super high reviews. Like let's see, because the IMDb reviews, like, so and two, a lot of times though with movies like Blue Velvet that came out in 86, it's really hard to like a Rotten Tomatoes meter, because a lot of reviews are more contemporary reviews and not reviews that came out at the time that it was released. Because like, so on IMDb, it's got a user score of 7.8 out of 10 and a Metacritic of 76. And then on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a higher score. But it's just funny, like, to reassess some of these movies compared to when they came out, and a lot of people probably hated it because too there was accusations of misogyny and things against the movie because like the violence against women, and that's like a trend you see throughout like Lynch's work. And even the new Twin Peaks has gotten some discussion about like the treatment of women. On Rotten Tomatoes, has got a 94% fresh rating, so it's one of those movies where it's really hard to like get an exact sense, since when in 1986 I was like a year old, so I obviously wasn't going to the theater to see this movie. And I didn't see it until I was in college, I think. But the the overall movie is one of the ones where you compare the perception when it came out to today, and it's vastly different. And two, I think it doesn't require as much patience as some of the other Lynch stuff. That's a little bit less linear and straightforward.
Yeah, you kind of know where you're going.
Because the runtime is 2 hours.
Yeah, you know where you're going. You can kind of guess what the next step is. Maybe not what you're going to see next, but the mystery element arc of it is not just kind of a series of connected vignettes that you aren't sure how or why they connect until the end, or if at all. I mean, I don't really have much more to say for the film because people have said so much stuff about it, but I don't know where I land. Just recently too, I was like, oh, it's like my favorite Lynch film, I think. But now I'm kind of, even after Twin Peaks: The Return, like I'm digging back into some other stuff I watched before, and again reevaluating. Yeah. And now I think like, okay, maybe Mulholland Drive is my favorite, but this also has just such strong characters that are, you have a difference in a lot of Lynch work, like Twin Peaks and this, where you have these great just kind of characters you can watch and you just like seeing on the screen. Yeah. All the characters in the original Twin Peaks. Now, it's not so much about the characters, it is about mood and tone and and kind of there's a lot of other things going on, and it's like what appeals to you and what are you kind of looking for, and this has a little bit of this has a lot of Lynch mood and tone, but also straightforward narrative and also some great characters to kind of latch on to and watch. So this has this is like a great Lynch film that is great for anybody to watch, a basic audience. as basic as you can be for a Lynch production.
Yeah, so, and like I said, it came out in 86, so the era this came out in, it's hard to kind of reconcile that now, because, like I said, when in 1986, I was, 1 year old, or depending on the year it came out, not even one yet, but, like, you have a lot of stuff where it's hard to, like, separate it from the era it came out in, but, like, if you watch this movie, it still feels somewhat timeless in that the movie itself kind of had a vibe that was, like, a more idolized, like, Leave It to Beaver type family. So even though it was made in the 80s, it didn't feel super dated to the 80s.
You couldn't put this next to Back to the Future in the 80s scenes and say, yeah, they took place at the same, they were shot at the same time or whatever. Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at it that way, but I guess we can kind of give our scores and wrap up the discussion. So out of 10, what would you give this movie?
I was thinking about that watching it too, because I've watched it so many times now. Like, it's almost like I know where the mystery's going, and I enjoy those characters, but once you get to Frank, that charges me up every time watching it. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's like, okay, have I kind of run my course with this film almost? Like, I would have given it a 10 out of 10 probably a couple years back.
Yeah.
Now I'd probably give it like a 9, I really enjoy it, but I've kind of had my time with it, I think. Then now I'm starting to be like, okay, now I think I can put this film to the side and now rewatch some more of his stuff that I haven't seen as much, because this is the Lynch film I've seen the most.
Yeah, I think I've seen this one the most too. Yeah, I mean, I think I would have to come in around the same mark, around like a 9. It's like stylistically, there's a lot of stuff in there to me that's very influential, just stylistically in terms of things I would want to do, and it's kind of a straightforward-ish narrative. Like you have like the mystery stuff going on, like who's this ear from and all that kind of gets wrapped up, and there's really not much left that you don't know. It's that like Frank kidnaps the woman's the woman's husband and son. He's involved in like different drug deals or whatever, like a crooked cop.
And when I first watched the film, I was like, oh, I love all that. Like, I love that storyline. And now this time, it's almost like that takes the backseat, because that isn't really...
That's less important than all the character traits.
Yeah, because the character traits kind of are what the film is about, the deep and dark underbelly stuff. Yeah. So it's almost like that stuff is, it's just there to kind of give you the Frank.
Yeah.
I don't know, to build some sort of mystery. It's not the
point. It's not like like to compare it to like another 80s film like Michael Mann's Manhunter. Like similar-ish era, and it's like about, it's based on the book Red Dragon of Hannibal and all that stuff. Which, watching this, you're like, what would Hannibal have been like if Dennis Hopper played him? Because like I would see Hannibal interact with Frank. I mean, I think Hannibal would just eat Frank, but the like you compare those those eras of films, and like Blue Velvet's more about the human toll and things like that, and it's much less about the mystery and much less about the murders than it is about like the character journey that like Jeffrey goes on and all that, and like what Frank means and the symbolism and all that.
And that's what like Mulholland Drive and like Lost Highway deal with, like on the whole. You know what I mean? They kind of throw away. There's a mystery narrative there, but it's not the mystery you've seen a lot of times with little twist on there. So I think there's like more to inspect, as far as every scene and element of those films than there are to this film now.
Yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up our discussion of Blue Velvet. And if you're listening to the podcast via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast.
Annabella Creation next week?
I think we'll do that.
We'll see.
Because I've been getting good reviews. Yeah. So we'll verify on social media. But yes, you can do a huge favor, leave reviews. On YouTube, we always enjoy seeing comments there, so you get some great feedback. You can send us an email at podcast@housepatvideostore.com. You can find links to all of our social media accounts on housepatvideostore.com. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all those places. With Facebook being the most important, and like YouTube. Like on Instagram too, I've been doing like stories. Like we shot a short film a few weeks ago, so I posted some stuff the day we were shooting out there on stories. And I know like on some of the... I'm going to try to start posting more Instagram stories and pictures and stuff that just show as like things are going on, because there's the short that we shot back in April and some pickup stuff in May after the slasher that's done that submitted to some festivals, waiting to see what happens with that. There was a short we shot a few weeks ago called Plucked that's in the editing process now that actually Chad directed, who's been on the podcast once before and was on like a bonus episode. And then there may be some more stuff in the works soon. So make sure to follow us on social media. You can find all the updates on anything like that. So if you find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_droid.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
Yep. And that will bring this episode of the House by Vegas Horror Podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.
House by the